What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about other factors out there, which you should be watching for as time goes on. But just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15. And the offer ends very soon, just about 2 weeks from now. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with the market. So as you guys can see, the market's range bound. As SPY gets very close to 608 area, we do tend to reject. As we get very close to 602 to 603, we tend to get bought back up. Now, despite the fact that SPY is getting tighter and showing a little bit of weakness as we are making lower highs here, I would say if anything, we're just getting tighter and tighter, and this trend is going to continue until FOMC. But if you look at like the QQQ or the Nasdaq, it's still a lot more bullish. It's a lot stronger, being led by big tech, and big tech still remains more bullish with some exceptions such as Nvidia. So I'll talk more about the charts in just a couple of minutes. I first want to talk about what's happening with all this data. Just know that right now the market's in a very interesting place. The majority of the stocks were more flat. Some were in the red, especially if you look at like the health and finance sectors. But big tech is what led the market up. If you look at Apple was in the green, Google's in the green, Microsoft, Amazon, they were all in the green. And the big winner was Tesla, up 6% for the day. Wedbush analysts have come out and they're very bullish on the share price, expecting $500+ per share very, very soon. So it's very, very awesome news for Tesla. I also want to mention that as far as Nvidia goes, it's still reacting more negatively to the bad news that came out last week. So not the best of news for Nvidia with the probe that's coming out and then other weakness in the semiconductor industry, at least for the short term. So we'll see what happens with that. But just know that that's one of the weaker sectors for now. But big tech still remains more elevated, and that's what's holding the market up so far. So what's happening tomorrow? Tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, December 17th, 2024. There's not really much coming out. In the morning, we have retail sales before market open, but then at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, look for more volatility as we have the industrial and manufacturing production numbers. That could cause a little bit of volatility here and there, but besides that, I'm not really expecting too much. And then for now, we also have some bill and bond auctions coming out at 11:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. So there might be some volatility at those times, but for the most part, the market's getting tighter. I also want to call out that going into Wednesday, December 18th, we have FOMC. We have the big guy, Jerome Powell, giving a speech, and the Fed's going to be announcing what they're doing with interest rates. So please keep that in mind. That's why we're going to be expecting a lot more volatility in the markets going into Wednesday. So we're very close to that. For now, we're just going to be waiting for these industrial numbers to come out. We'll see how the market holds up tomorrow. And then Wednesday's FOMC day, so just be prepared just to be safe. For other pieces of data, just know there's not really much coming out for the next couple of days, very minor earnings. We do have some retail, such as General Mills, and then a couple more coming out. We have Nike, FedEx, and a few more like BlackBerry later on during the week. But for the most part, more minor earnings. Now, as far as the market's sentiment is going, we're now a lot more greedy than before. There's more greed in this market as there are buyers still continuing to step in for big tech, holding the QQQ up. The S&P 500 is still at greed. It's still flat, but overall it's still well above its 125 daily moving average. So that is not too bad. The put to call option ratio is flat right now, not really doing much. We'll see if this starts spiking if the market gets a dip. So far, there's not extreme put buying that's going on right now. So we're just seeing positions being flat, at least from the 5-day average. That's what we're essentially looking at. The VIX is trying to push a little bit, but we haven't broken some key resistance. For now, we'll be watching to see what ends up happening. So what is my view of the market? What do I think is going to happen? Here's my honest assessment. So the market's range bound, at least when it comes to SPY and the S&P 500. As of right now, this is all we're doing. We're going back and forth between supply and demand. So we hit this resistance near the 608 area, which is the level we called out yesterday's tough resistance. Our support is going to be between 602 to 603. As you can see, we kind of rejected here coming back down. So I do anticipate we're going to be doing something like this going into FOMC. And then Jerome Powell's either going to cause this to launch up to break all-time highs, or we're about to get a big rug pull during his speech, and it's going to cause like a big dump. I believe FOMC is going to be the big catalyst causing more volatility. And for now, the market's going to get a lot more tight. So for tomorrow, I anticipate there might be a little pullback during the pre-market right back down to where this low is, very close to the 604 area. Then we should get bought back up and just continue to trade sideways until we get a big break. I think that when the data comes out, there could be a little dip coming, and then we just continue to remain range bound. And then Jerome Powell and the Fed are going to be the bigger factor going into Wednesday, causing a lot more volatility. So for now, we're range bound. I do expect this to continue, as you guys can see what the pattern is going to look like. And as we're stuck, we'll be watching to see what happens once we get FOMC. which is less than 2 days away technically. So for ES, the same setup. We're actually making lower highs here. We could dip a little bit lower to about 60-60. If that fails us, we're looking for essentially 60-40. In that range, we could be testing this range and we could be trying to rebound. But otherwise, we're just completely stuck going back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. So look for a small pullback towards 60-60 to 60-40, then a bounce back up. I think we might just be stuck at least as time goes on. Now, this resistance around 6100 is going to be key. We haven't broken past that yet to be more bullish. And we haven't lost 60-40 to turn more bearish. Otherwise, we're just stuck going back and forth and back and forth. So expect a little bit of a dip back down to our demand zone area before we get a bounce back up for the time being. But then as time goes on, there could be a bigger move that's coming once we get the FOMC numbers. So wait for that. Otherwise, the market's going to get a little bit tighter. Now, Nvda is showing some weakness, and the reason for that is because we are forming a more distributive structure, and the bad news involving the probes and the semiconductor industry is still affecting them. So we have like a left shoulder here, we have a head up here, and like a right shoulder forming. This could lead to some downside for Nvda. Now, if we break structure at this 130 area, this is going to be the main support at 130. I do expect this to dip down towards 128, and then this next imbalance takes us down towards 125. If we want to bounce, you want to get back above 135 to turn back up. Otherwise, this head and shoulders remains like the more more prominent setup. So for now, Nvidia is looking more bearish. It was trying to rebound in the morning. It just failed straight up. It didn't even reach my 135 target, came short. And now because of that, it is looking more bearish. So this is now favoring downside a bit more. There's a large head and shoulders. We got to get back above at least 137 to turn back up. Otherwise, this is just favoring downside. And 130 and 128 could be potential targets, unfortunately. For Bitcoin, we're looking more bullish. We're holding up very nicely. We did bounce off our support. I was thinking it was going to test our 20 EMA, then bounce actually came a little bit short of that target and ended up bouncing above that. We hit 108,000's resistance, so I could be looking for a retest of this area, the 105,000 zone. And we'll see if we bounce off that, but overall, it's looking more bullish. As long as we don't lose 103,426, we're still favoring upside very greatly. So great job by Bitcoin and its holders. For Tesla, we have an absolute monster. This thing is just continuing to squeeze. There was good news that came out about their new lithium refinery that's opened in Texas. That's very bullish for their battery production. And then on top of that, we have Wedbush and many different analysts that are very bullish on the share price. So as long as we don't lose support at this 460 area, right? The more lines I draw out, the more this thing just continues to break out. It's pretty wild. It's very simple. We're going to be testing essentially 472 is the next resistance. If we break 470, 475, then 480. It's very simple like that. Make sure you watch those levels very, very closely. So I think there's a lot more potential in this. Just continue to attempt to push. And we're doing a wonderful job, at least thus far. I want to just say that Tesla also has the potential to break out past not just the all-time high here, but it could also continue to try to get closer to 500 if we continue at this rate, because there's no sign of this stopping yet. So make sure you watch these supports just to be safe, and just know that we are still looking quite bullish thus far, and there's a good chance that we are going to essentially continue this trend. So we look bullish in terms of the way Tesla is moving. We could be looking for 475, eventually 480 is our targets. As long as we don't lose 460, I think this is going to continue to push for 475, and there's no sign of this stopping just yet. For NQ, we look more bullish. We managed to break past 22,000. We might retest the lower like 22,000 area right here, and we'll see if we balance off that to continue. If we lose 22,000, we could be on our way back down to about the support over here around 21,900. So I think that we could be dipping just a little bit tomorrow morning before we attempt to continue. But as long as we're above 22,000, we remain a lot more bullish. The share price has been pumping. There's no sign of it stopping. And if we manage to hold above 22,000, our next target could be 22,200. So overall, it looks a lot more bullish. For the QQQ, we look more bullish. As long as we don't end up losing the support right over here around this 535 area, we are going to continue to push. We have 540 as the main resistance. I think we could be pushing for 540, then 542. And if we end up losing our support around this 535 area, we're going to be looking for a move back down towards 532, then 529.8. So as long as 535 does not break, I think we favor 540, then 542. Overall, the QQQ remains bullish. Volume is slowing down just a little bit, but it's not too bad. And overall, there's no sign of it stopping. So this could continue to squeeze, especially as big tech is holding up very well. Tesla's what's leading the way up, so that's really helping it. Apple looks more bullish. As long as we don't lose 250, then 248, we are favoring 252.5, then eventually 254. So I do anticipate 252 and 252.5 as our targets as we look more bullish on Apple. So it's doing a great job so far, and there's a lot more buyers who are continuing to step in. For other factors out there, we have Netflix. Looking at the way Netflix is moving, we have like a bearish divergence that formed here. So the issue with Netflix is we did attempt to rebound. We got to try to get back above 921 and hold it. If that's the case, I'm looking for 930 as our target. If it fails here, we could be looking for a dip back down to 909. Now it's possible that this is trying to form like an inverse head and shoulders with like a head here, a left shoulder, maybe like a right shoulder is about to form for a bounce. But as long as we hold above 921, I turn more bullish. If 921 fails us, we're going to be coming back down to about 915. So please keep that level in mind. Watch 920 to 921. Let's see which way we break. Hopefully it tries to hold above 921 to push up for 930. I see potential in this looking at the potential setup. For MSTR, not the best of moves. We were trying to bounce here only to reject. So we're looking for a test of 403.4. If that does not hold, we look for 394. Look for a small dip tomorrow. We'll see if we bounce off 403. If it doesn't bounce off that, look for 394 for where it could end up bouncing. So look for a little bit more downside, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get from there. I anticipate that it might actually break structure here and come back down to at least the low 400s. So watch for that very carefully. For Celsius or CELH, we look a little bit more bearish. If we lose 30.87, we're looking for a move back down towards this gap area around 30. If this holds, we could attempt to bounce for 32. But overall, this is still favoring 30 flat and then the lower support down here. So I anticipate some downside for 30 for Celsius. So look for some downside before we see anything else. For Supermicro, we're on a bit of a downtrend here. We're making lower highs, at least thus far. So I could be looking for a dip all the way down towards this 30 area. So please keep that in mind. It's showing a little bit of weakness to me, especially as semiconductors are slowing down. So there's a good chance that this is going to continue to dip towards 30. If that fails us, that's also going to be previous resistance becoming support. This imbalance takes us down to 26.75. So look for downside for 30, then 26.75 is our targets. Please keep that in mind. Palantir tried to bounce, but I think we got some negative news, unfortunately, so that's what slowed it down. So we might be looking for a retest of about 73.85. As long as we hold that, we could try to bounce and continue to uptrend slowly. But look for a test of 73.85 tomorrow. A little dip could be coming. We have to bounce off that. If not, 71 is coming. So look for a dip to 73. If we don't bounce off that, we could dip a little bit lower, but then we should try to bounce off one of those supports. For a small dip and a bounce is the most likely case. For others out there, we have Rivian. Rivian is looking quite decent, at least thus far. We called that upside yesterday, and that was correct. So I'm going to be looking for 15.5 as our target. If that breaks, I think 16 is going to come. As long as we don't lose the support right over here around this 14.8 area to dip to 14.25, we're favoring a push for 15.5, then 16 is our target. So I do look for a little bit more upside from here. I think there's a good chance we try to push higher. For other factors out there, I think 17 is going to be a nice target for SoFi. If that breaks, we're looking for 17.25. If we end up losing the support right here around 16.6, we're looking for essentially 16.2. So this is favoring 17 and 17.25 as our potential targets. I think this looks more bullish. So SoFi is doing a great job thus far. For the IWM Russell 2000, we are showing some potential because we are trying to get bought back up into this channel. We need to get back above 235.5. If that breaks, we're looking for 236.8, which aligns with our 50 EMA. So we were in this channel. We broke a little bit below this. Now we're trying to get bought back up. I think it might be trying to retest 235.5 tomorrow, if not 236.75. Might be a small push tomorrow, and we'll see if it continues in this range. But overall, it's still stuck in a channel. It hasn't officially gone a big break out of it, and we're still holding support. So I expect a small push and some consolidation tomorrow. For AMD, it looks weaker. I think that this has the potential to dip a little bit lower, all the way down towards that 125 to 122.5 area. So I think it might dip a little bit lower. We have this big red bar that formed here. This might lead to a little bit of a dip to about the 125 area. To turn back up, you want to reclaim 130. Otherwise, we favor 125 to 120, the 122.5 zone. So look for a little bit more downside, and we'll see how things end up going from here. So please keep that in mind. For ARM, we got this big rejection of our 4-hour bar. So I think that if we don't reclaim 146, red risk of coming down to 142.63. So that could be coming very, very soon. 142.63 is going to be a nice target than 140.93. So watch that zone. There could be a small dip coming before anything else. So please keep that in mind. For Coinbase, unfortunately, there is one issue with it, and that's the fact that it's very choppy right now. The market's kind of tight, so that's not really a surprise. But there's this big gap down here to fill. So If we don't hold 315, expect it to dip all the way down to about the 311 area, then 310 to fill that gap and then come back down to support. And if 310 doesn't hold, we have another gap down here. So that could take us down to 303. So there's going to be a risk of downside, a little bit of a dip to about 311. So there might be a small dip coming. Don't be surprised if you end up seeing that. Don't be phased by that. And that's what's looking very probable on the charts. For Amazon, it's strong so far. It has not lost 230, actually held above that. We could be looking for a retest of 231, which is the previous resistance becoming support. Then we'll see if we bounce off this and start pushing for 235. If we lose 228, however, I will turn a bit more bearish and I'll be targeting 225. So please keep those levels in mind. This is favoring a small dip to 231.5, then a bounce and a continuation higher for 234 or above. It looks bullish. It's doing a great job so far. There's no sign of it rejecting. So I think it's doing a fantastic job at holding up. Meta's also holding up very nicely. We got to hold 622 just to be safe. As long as we hold this, we could continue to push for 630. If we lose 622, we could be tipping back down towards 617. So please keep that in mind. But there's potential for us to get back up to about 628 or above. Hopefully we hold the support and start pushing for 628 and then 632. As long as we don't lose 622, I do favor the upside view. For Microsoft, we're holding our 20 EMA very nicely. As long as we don't lose 450, then 447.37, we favor a little bit more upside now. I was worried about the head and shoulders, but we did not lose support to start dipping down here. So we held the support right here to start pushing up. So this looks like it could be attracting them balance above towards the 453 area. That could be pushing us a little bit more bullish. So I think that there is potential for a 2 to 3 point move to the upside for Microsoft. So long as we don't lose 450, then 447 for whatever news comes out tomorrow, we are favoring 453 is the most likely case as long as we hold support. Google, it looks so. We did hit 200, which is great, but there's a slight bearish divergence, and I did say we could be hitting 200, but we'll watch and see if we get a rejection off of it. So it's possible we're trying to form like a cup and handle, but this could be dipping a little bit lower, back down to our support right here around this 195-ish area. So be on the lookout for a potential dip that could be coming. So watch that very, very closely. And we'll have to see what happens after that. So there might be a dip to about 195, and we'll see what kind of move we make. So be very, very patient, very careful. We could be retesting 195. And we'll see if we bounce. But if anything, that's what we're essentially looking at. For GameStop is, there's a possible inverse head and shoulders here. It could be trying to push above 30. So I see some potential in this. If 30 breaks, we could be attempting to revisit this high up here where this imbalance is. It's about 31.25. So look for 30 and 31.25 as potential targets. As long as we don't lose 28.3, we favor a little bit more upside. AMC could also attempt to bounce here. It already dumped so much. So as long as 4 holds, we're looking for a rebound for about 4.25. So I see a little bit of potential in that. DJT got a nice bounce. I think we had good news that came out. This offset the gap that was like forming over here. So we're looking for 40 as our potential targets. We'll see if we break past that or not, but I think we might continue to this push a little bit more. However, despite the fact that this push is coming, just be a little bit more careful because there's a lot of chop in this stock, so it could be a little tricky for a lot of investors. Now, one thing that's a little concerning for the markets would be the VIX. The VIX is trying to push right here. If the VIX gets a breakout, or if we start pushing higher, this could be a signal the market's about to top, and there could be a pullback coming. So is Jerome Powell going to cause a rug pull in the markets? Okay. Could this be a sign that there's an inverse head and shoulders in the VIX and the VIX is about to break out? And because the market's about to get a pullback, is that what's about to happen? I can't answer that question until I hear what Jerome Powell has to say, because there could always be trickery in the market. So you never know what's always going to happen. So we'll see about that, but this is a sign that the market might get a pullback soon. It's a big maybe. We'll have to see if the VIX continues. The 10-year is also breaking out. This is going to be affected by FOMC, so we're waiting for 2 days to see how this reacts. And then the dollar, although it dipped down to the support, it is technically on an uptrend. It's uptrending technically, which could be favoring the 107s, 107.5 or above. So that could be favoring that the market's about to see some kind of pullback if this uptrend were to continue. Now, not a guarantee until we see the numbers, but with that being said, I thank you all so much for listening. Just know that as far as tomorrow goes for the S&P 500, there might be a lot of range-bound price action. Look for a small dip upon opening for us to just remain in this range. I think that's most likely what's going to happen. And the next catalyst to really break this range, it might be FOMC. That might be what the market's waiting for. Okay. So with that being said, thank you all so much for listening. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll be back tomorrow before market open to give you guys more updates on what I see for the markets. Until then, take care and peace out.